Hey Primatech peeps, and welcome back to the Primatech Files, a Southgate Media Group podcast dedicated to all things Heroes and Heroes Reborn related. I'm flying solo again today, but I'm being joined by a very special guest. If you listened to our last Primatech Files, you know that we talked about the fan novel Heroes Godsend. Hopefully you enjoyed our review and had a chance to read the novel for yourself, because today we have an interview with the author himself, Adam Sklar. Welcome, Adam.
Hello, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you. So let's start off. Why don't you tell our audience a little bit about yourself? So how did you, get started into writing, or just like anything that you want to let us know?
Of course, sure, I can do that. When I was younger, I used to be very interested in doing independent films, short films, and acting and the like. And unfortunately, I found that to be far too ambitious for me to do. And eventually, I decided that perhaps instead of letting my stories go to waste, I should practice writing. And I found my hero story to be the perfect example to begin with.
Was there anything from your childhood that kind of inspired you to either become a writer or become an actor?
Nothing in particular. I mean, every childhood had their sort of dream that start out like astronauts or policemen or firemen, things like that. And yeah, I've always wanted to be an astronaut, and then I wanted to be an actor. So that's quite a transition there. Um, no, I just had a big thing about films. I always loved the fact that you could not be yourself for a little while and just absorb the mindset of a fictional character and just have the ability to play that because if you've noticed, even on the Heroes Godsend promotional pictures, I have put myself up there as the main character.
Mm.
Not just because I didn't have anybody else to do it, but because I really like to be able to put myself on my project.
Mm. Okay. Oh yeah, because when I was younger, I also wanted to be an astronaut, and then I wanted to go work on the X-Files, and then and then
Yeah.
I wanted to be a wrestler. And I think the film that kind of did it for me was Clerks by Kevin Smith. That really made me want to get into
Oh yeah.
film and TV. So yeah. But anyway, let's move on. You're obviously a Heroes fan. When did you kind of jump into the universe?
Yeah, of course, I'm a massive Heroes fan. I think the novel said that. I wasn't a fan from the first time it came out, but that's purely because I hadn't heard of it at the time.
Mm.
Like I said, I've always loved films and TV shows that surrounded superpowers as well, especially the kind that offered a sense of real life drama,
Mm.
which Heroes very much covers. It wasn't until somebody came up to me in school in, I think, 2007 or 8, and somebody came up to me and said, "Hi, have you seen Heroes?" And I said, "No, I haven't heard of it." And they said that there was a character in the show that very much sounded like my surname, and that's Sylar.
Yeah.
And if you change the K in my surname to Y, you get Sylar. So
Mm.
that was very interesting, and that's literally how I got into Heroes. And just because it was the kind of thing I liked, I've been glued to it ever since.
Okay. Is there a particular moment from Heroes that made you like say, okay, this is the show for me? Like, was there a particular episode or a particular moment?
I remember the first time I saw Hero standing on top of that building
Mm.
and he looked at the eclipse, and that shot has stuck with me ever since.
Mm.
And I thought there was something special about this. And it's just the premise itself, that there's this world where people have powers and nobody knows about it, or at least at the time, nobody
Mm.
knew about it.
Yeah.
And I just thought that was really interesting. I loved the sort of the conspiracy drama in the background going on with
Mm.
Arthur Petrelli in the later seasons.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it was for me personally, despite the negative reviews that came about, it was gripping throughout.
Okay. Did you have a favorite character throughout the whole series, or did you have a character that you kind of identified with?
Yeah, I my favorite character is actually Noah Bennett.
Okay.
And even though it's funny because he doesn't have any powers at all, and this is a show about people with powers,
Mm.
but it was his intellect that I enjoyed. And that, of course, makes me even more glad that I chose to set Godsend in between Heroes and Reborn because, spoilers aside, it would be impossible to set Godsend after Reborn. I do love all the characters, and it's very difficult to really choose a consistent favorite because there are quite a lot of performances that I liked based on the story that was going on. But I loved Robert Knepper's performance as Samuel Sullivan.
Yes.
I thought he did a fantastic job for a villain.
Mm.
And that was a really good story. I enjoyed that. I was actually sort of hoping that his plan would happen, where he tried to
Yeah.
destroy everything. I was thinking that would make for a really good ending, but
Mm.
no.
We still kind of got it with Claire being her usual self. But anyway, are there any influences on your kind of writing style?
The original series of Heroes was definitely a major influence, and a lot of the TV shows I watched serve as additional influences also. And funnily enough, there are shows like The Walking Dead, Lost, Supernatural, and so on. All of these things that sort of offer inspiration that I can combine to make unique elements that work in the Heroes universe. But the one thing you may have noted in Godsend is that there was quite a graphic level of gore depicted
Mm.
through the usage of abilities and stuff that isn't really shown in the TV show. But that's something I really wanted to touch upon. And so, yeah.
Was there any influences on the story of Heroes Godsend? Like, where did you come up with the idea, and did it all flow from there? Can you just let us know about how the story came about?
Absolutely. It was completely different when I first came up with it back in 2010. It was called Heroes Reborn, which is another very, very strange thing. But back then it was completely different. I've always had the idea for the main character to be, of course, again, spoilers for the book, but I've always had the idea for the main character to be Noah Gray.
Mm.
And it was all about how I could make that happen. And when I was sort of writing up the ideas originally, I considered actually making the main character Samuel Sullivan's son because of how
Okay.
much I enjoyed his character.
Mm.
But in the end, I thought, no, I'll stick with Noah Gray because I think there's more potential there.
Mm.
And but yeah, when the show got cancelled in 2010, I was gutted. I was so upset. I thought this is the only thing I could think of doing was coming up with my own spin-off story.
Mm.
And at the time, it was called Heroes Reborn, which by now I'm sure most hero fans know that means reborn in Latin.
Mm.
And it was supposed to follow a boy who actually had the ability to absorb memories, and
Okay.
he inherited the memories from his lost father, which would have been Sylar. So that story would have been all about his quest to find his dad through trying to remember his father's memories.
Mm.
So, of course, that's very different, but even that idea still had the company in it, the Preservation of Eden,
Yeah.
and they would have had Sylar captive and used his powers in the form of a machine, which again is very similar. I've adopted some of the older ideas to work in the final story.
Mm. Okay. So, how long did it take you to write the story from beginning to end? And obviously, there was a couple of rewrites because you started off with Heroes Renatus, but let us know.
Yeah, it took quite some time. There were quite a few rewrites here and there, but the main story often always stayed the same. The beginning and the end barely changed. It was what bridged that
Mm.
went through a lot of revisions in order to feel as natural as possible. And of course, these 10 chapters only take place over the course of 2 or 3 days.
Mm.
So, and I had trouble actually when I was writing it, thinking about how long it was actually taken to in the actual world. Because for me, I started writing it when Heroes Reborn was announced. Because that really kicked it off for me. I thought,
Yeah.
well, because of the whole Renata thing,
Mm.
I thought, well, that's really strange. So I'm going to write my story. And I finished it on New Year's Day 2016, so January 1st, 2016,
Mm.
and that was not long after, or not long before, Heroes Reborn finished in the
Yeah.
States. And so I wanted to get out as soon as possible. And yeah, so I mean, it's just strange that it took that long to write, but the story itself is
Mm.
only a couple of days long.
Just wondering, was there any influences from Heroes Reborn in the book, or had you pretty much had it all done before then?
I kind of refused to watch Heroes Reborn until I made Godsend.
Okay.
And that was so I didn't get influenced or inspired by Heroes
Mm.
Reborn because I wanted to make sure my idea wouldn't be touched any further.
Yeah.
So no, there are no influences from Heroes Reborn, but as you know, I'll be writing a few more chapters
Yeah.
on Godsend to close off the story, and that will have influences from Heroes Reborn. So I've kind of bridged the first 10 chapters with whatever chapters come next. I'm planning 10, but it could be less,
Mm.
and so I want to make sure that sort of bridge is clear and obvious. So the first 10 were written before Reborn, and the next however many chapters there will be were written after Reborn.
Okay. How did you come up with the powers for everyone in the story, from Noah Gray all the way up to like Lily and Dylan and Quentin?
Oh, that's interesting, actually. Mostly imagination
Mm.
and inspiration from other superhero films, but I knew having the main character with unlimited powers would be too sort of like cliched,
Mm.
and not just cliched, but very difficult to do. Because if you have a person with unlimited powers, everything should go their way, right?
Mm.
Well, I had to make sure there was some kind of cap, as you know in the book. He wasn't able to use his powers fully,
Mm.
and there are quite a few new powers, and some we've already seen before in the show.
Mm.
But my favorite new one had to be the ability to jump into parallel universes because that's something we've never touched upon before in Heroes. But I really, really enjoyed coming up with the whole Dylan Quentin thing
Yeah.
because they were both put into a machine and their powers worked in unison together to
Yeah.
create clones. And that's something, actually, in Heroes Reborn, when I watched it, I was worried when they went down where all those, what episode is this? When, Quentin and Noah went down to the basement and they found all those heroes tied
Yeah.
up to those machines.
Yeah.
I was thinking that there was some kind of machine element going on there, similar to
Mm.
my story, but it wasn't. So
Yeah.
it was just nice to know that there were similarities here and there. It made me think I was on the right track.
Definitely.
And but yeah, there were quite a lot of powers that were similar but worked in different ways. And Hisoka Quincy, the character that turned up for a little while, his power was interesting. I wanted originally for him to make people forget things, but what he did was he had the ability to turn people into some kind of autopilot mode
Yeah.
where they would just go about their day in a normal way and forget what they did.
Mm.
And that was quite strange, but an interesting thing to work on.
Yeah. Why the character of Noah Gray? Is this the kind of Noah Gray that we met in season 3? And what was the main kind of inspiration for the character?
Yes and no.
Mm.
As we know, Noah Gray was never born in the Heroes universe, and because it was in an alternate future that never happened.
Yeah.
But that struck a chord with me. I thought this was some almost like untapped oil, if that makes sense. I
Mm.
thought it was something I could do with it, and so rather than setting the entire story in another universe, I wanted to make sure that it was still within the same universe from the show.
Mm.
So I had to come up with an idea to bring him into R1, which you find out at the end, obviously, is from a parallel universe. Um, Sylar is a fan favorite character, and I didn't really want to rely on that entirely,
Mm.
but I wanted to take advantage of his legacy. And we knew that his legacy never came to be in the show. So this is how the entire story of Godsend came about, with the introduction of parallel universes.
Oh, I think it's very interesting, the parentage of Noah Gray, because when I first saw it, that's kind of when I first saw the original Noah Gray show up in the show or the parallel universe, that's exactly who I thought the mother was. So yeah, I thought that
Yeah,
was very interesting.
good, glad.
Did you watch Heroes Reborn? And if so, what did you think about it as a one-off kind of season?
Heroes Reborn had some really exciting moments. The origin of Tommy and Melina was placed really well, and it was written really nicely. It explained perfectly why Claire died, because I think that's something we all had doubts about when it first got revealed. We thought, how can she possibly die? And it makes sense that Tommy would have Arthur's powers. There were some touch and go moments in the show. Some moments I didn't quite like, but some moments I really enjoyed.
Mm.
Do you remember that fight that Katana Girl had with Harris?
Yes.
That felt to me out of place.
Which one? The one near the end, the one where she defeats him.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Yeah, did it feel out of place to you, or did you like that bit?
I kind of like. I wanted it to be a bit more kick-ass, but
Yeah,
it
yeah,
felt all right. For where it was, because they kind of had to get rid of him. They
yeah.
kind of had to get rid of Harris. He was like the major kind of obstacle apart from Erica. So
I agree. I just feel like they could have done it in a better way, a
yeah.
more dramatic way. But it was like Katana Girl was kind of like a Deus Ex Machina kind of thing,
Hmm.
and she was very much there for that kind of purpose. But she was an interesting character, something we've never seen before. This digital character,
Yeah.
like that. But no, another thing I didn't like in Reborn was when Quentin recognized Noah after he came back from the past. Of course, the past had been changed now,
Hmm.
so Quentin was never friends with Noah Bennett. So how does he recognize him?
Ah.
That's my question there. But apart from that, a couple of minor issues. I loved Reborn. I thought it was a really good story. I think Luke's conclusion was slightly out of place as well. I felt that could have been hyped up a bit more and made to be a bit more dramatic, but it just looked like he sort of floated in the air and then just went. So I don't really know what happened there, but I feel like there were some moments where characters that were about to go, die or sacrifice themselves or whatever, could have been done in a much nicer way.
Hmm.
I thought Matt's conclusion was quite interesting, considering we've seen him now sort of turn back to the dark side again, so
Yeah.
to say. And then, of course, he tried to turn good again, but ultimately his priority was always his wife and kid.
Hmm.
So he sort of got punished for that. Karma sort of hit him.
Hmm.
But it was interesting to see that sort of ending for him. But I would have liked to have seen where it went from there. So it is interesting considering they were going to do this as a one-off season and then end it on a cliffhanger.
Yeah.
I know they want to tie it into some other forms of media and that they've said that it's not the end of Heroes and so on. So it should be interesting to see where they go from here. But like I said earlier, Noah Bennett was my favorite character. So it was very sad to see him go.
Yeah, definitely. Did you have a favorite character of the new Heroes Reborn people?
Yes, I did have a favorite character, but it sort of shifted in between episodes.
Mm.
I really liked Tommy. I didn't think I was going to like him that much. Again, Noah Bennett stayed my favorite. It was nice to see some of the old characters again, like Hero, and but Tommy was really good. I think he had much more screen time than Melina as well.
Yeah.
So he was very much one of the main characters, and it was really good to see him. His powers were interesting. I did think it was strange though because I'm not sure exactly. I can't remember exactly how Arthur's powers worked or Tommy's powers worked, but I'm pretty sure he touched Luke at one point but didn't get his powers.
Yeah.
So I don't know if there was if something was missed there in writing or if he can choose or isn't aware of when he gets powers because obviously he took Heroes away from him.
In my mind, it was always he would always take the powers when he was in moments of stress. So obviously, he's being born, so he's very stressful. That's why he took Claire's powers, and it's the same when he kind of first was taken by Hero, time traveled by Hero, and then basically Hero led him away from people and kind of taught him how to use his powers. So that's just me. That's just my thoughts on it. So
no, I agree with you now. Actually, that you raised that point. I think that's a very good point. I didn't really think of it that way. But yeah, it was quite sad to see Hero grow old. I'd like to think that he can get his powers back at some stage. But I saw some people point out the ending was a little strange. With Angela Petrelli in the car at the end, and she was young again.
Well, me and Lilith, my co-host, talked about this, and we just said, well, she's been out hiding out for ages, so she just let herself go. And as soon as she knew she was going back to the real world, she was like, well, let's just put a bit of dye in the hair. Let's get back to how I used to look. But yeah, who knows?
That's a good point.
So let's get back to Heroes Godsend. So am I to take it that in the next couple of chapters of the book that you're currently working on, that we're going to start seeing more about this alternative parallel universe?
Yes, absolutely. Chapter 10 concluded with Ione, a new character, taking Noah back home.
Yeah.
But chapter 11 picks up the story 2 years later. Okay. So there will be flashback chapters again that sort of cover Noah's time in the alternate universe. I don't want to rely on being there too long because the main story is taking place back at home.
Okay.
But there isn't a lot of differences in the alternate universe, except for the fact that what I call the Sullivan incident, where Claire jumped off the Ferris wheel, never happened.
Okay.
So in that universe, heroes haven't been exposed.
Okay.
So obviously, Ione had tried to get Noah back various times, and the only time she was able to do that was at the beginning of the book, when the Nomad got Noah teleported outside the Petrelli Manor. In that one sort of moment in between, teleported from there to there, there was this tiny opening that she tried to get him, and that wasn't a hallucination that Noah had. He did see a hand try to reach out for him, but the hallucination was the wings. And that was an interesting thing, actually, because I was actually really considering for a moment for Ione to have wings. But I didn't like that because I felt that might be a bit too X-Men.
Yeah.
So I kept that out and left the wings in as like a hallucination sort of thing. And the next chapter is called Nephilim, which covers Ione because her nickname is Nephilim.
Okay.
But chapter 12 will be called Nomadic Consequences, which obviously covers all the consequences from the Nomad's action. And chapter 13 will be called Father of None.
Okay.
That's all I've decided so far. That's all I've written so far as well. But Father of None is a really nice chapter, I think, because it's actually a flashback to we see the Nomad again as a younger person, back to his first kill.
Okay.
And so it's all about how he came to be, how he found out about the parallel universes, Noah Gray, the Godsend Device, and all that. So yeah, absolutely, you'll see more about the parallel universe and all these extra elements in the next few chapters.
Just on a slight tangent about the Nomad, was he kind of a throwback to season 1 HRG in the fact that you don't really know his name? He's just known as this kind of HRG / Nomad, and you don't find out his name till the very end.
That's definitely it. The inspiration
Okay.
was there. The inspiration was definitely there. I love the idea of having that sort of HRG element of not
Mm,
knowing who the character is, but you don't have a name to put to his face.
yeah.
So everybody knows him as the Nomad. Nobody, even his employees, don't know his name.
Mm,
So you think that might be a bit of an egotistical thing of him, just
yeah.
I'm the Nomad and all that. But no, I really liked that because it added some element of sadness at the end when he
Yeah.
went. Of course, when his wife killed him,
Yeah.
that was something he couldn't prevent because he couldn't block. You can't block the powers of clones
Mm,
or any actions of clones rather. So the abilities don't work on them.
mm,
And I thought that was a very interesting element. And so the fact that she says his name at the end was,
yeah.
I thought, a very powerful moment.
Yeah, definitely. So, just talking about the Godsend device, have you ever seen the work? Have you ever seen the show Fringe?
Actually, yes, not until after I
Okay.
I started watching Heroes Godsend and I just finished watching another show of mine. I can't remember what they'd gone on to their season finale. So I
Mm,
was looking for a new show to watch, and I'd always been meaning to watch Fringe for quite some
mm,
time. So I thought, okay, it's on Netflix. I'll give it a watch. And then they started covering the topics of parallel
yeah.
universes, and I thought, wow, this is great. I love it, and it's similar to what I've done in Godsend.
Mm,
And but obviously there's no overlap
yeah.
as
Yeah.
important as it is in Fringe, where they
Mm,
go from one to the other
yeah.
constantly. No, Fringe is one of my all-time favorite shows. I absolutely love it, and I really hope they bring that back too for like a limited run.
Yeah.
They've got to save everybody. They've got to do that. But yeah, Fringe aside, it was really surprising to see something else that had parallel universes. But of course, you've got so many people coming up with ideas for stories
Yeah.
all over the world. There's going to be some overlap.
Mm,
But having said that, like we spoke about the whole Venata thing, that will always bother me for the rest of my life. Not in a big way, but it will just be lingering in the back of my mind, like, do you know what? I really wonder if somebody working at NBC or whatever saw that poster of mine and thought, I quite like the name Venata. I don't know.
just to kind of start finishing off, just making sure the next chapters to Heroes Godsend are going to be set after Heroes Reborn.
No, they'll still be set before Reborn.
Okay.
So as we know, Heroes Godsend, the first 10 chapters take place in 2011.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so the next few chapters, aside from the flashback, will take place in 2013.
Okay.
So you're still a couple of years before Reborn.
Yeah.
One of the things that I'm really looking forward to write is yeah, I'll be including the character from Reborn
Okay.
that will come into the story. And I think this will be a really good thing to see because it will be somebody close to Noah Bennett who gets the chance to see him again.
Okay. Do you have any ideas for stories after Heroes Reborn?
No, I don't. I mean, I loved coming up with the whole Godsend story, and it was all about Noah Gray, and the rest of the story is all going to be about Noah Gray as well,
Okay.
and it's going to be it's not this isn't a spoiler or anything, by the way.
Hmm.
This is going to be the end of Noah Gray's story.
Okay.
So take that how you will. That's the end of Noah Gray's story, and he's the character I've really enjoyed writing because he's at the same time a canon character, but one that's never been expanded upon.
Hmm.
So I felt like I was able to write him in the way I saw fit.
Yeah.
And of course, as you know, his character is very different because he was basically kidnapped by the Nomad as a baby,
Hmm.
raised by the Nomad. So he's a very different character than he could have been if he were raised by Sylar, for example.
Hmm. Speaking about canon characters who haven't been used very much, we were just wondering if you had any plans to write about the founders, because the founders from the company, they were a really big part, but they never got really talked more about.
I was tempted to write about them, absolutely. Before I came up with the Preservation of Eden in
Mm,
this book, I was going to be writing about the founders. I was going to be writing about the company. I was going to have them be the ones responsible for everything that happened, so therefore I could expand upon them.
mm,
But instead, I only hinted toward them. Um, like we discussed, not in this conversation, but in a previous conversation, I try not to touch on canon characters too much.
yeah.
But of course, I really felt like I had to involve Noah Bennett and Hero in this story because I wanted it to overlap with their story.
Mm,
But as for things like the founders, I think some things are better left like a mystery.
yeah.
So with the latter 10 chapters, if it is 10, it definitely Noah Gray's time to shine. It's all about him, and he will be joining the group of heroes that we know, including one other from Reborn. So yeah,
Awesome. Is there anything that you'd like to plug?
So yeah, if you'd like to keep in touch and find out more about my hero story and my upcoming Faceless story as well, it's a video game I'm working on as well as a novel, I have a Facebook page at /Sklar2, and yeah, you can find me there.
Awesome. So I'd like to thank you, Adam, for coming on and taking the time. We'll try and get you back on once the next chapters have come out.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I appreciate this interview.
No problem. And thank you all for listening. Hope you found the interview entertaining and informative. Until next time, download the podcast, save the world.